Welcome! You are listening to the CRM Success Show, where you will hear from CRM executives who have overseen some of the most interesting and complex CRM implementations. Your hosts, David Masri and Kira Whitey, will be bringing you real stories, real insight. Follow along on social media for updates on new episode releases, exclusive content, and much more. Enjoy the show and thanks for listening.
Welcome to the CRM Success Show, where we deep dive into CRM success and failure, delivering real stories with real impact. I'm Dave Masri.
And I'm Kira Whitey.
And today we're talking with Niraj Jain, the Global Head of Strategic Partner Platforms at Mercedes-Benz. So welcome, Niraj.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
We're glad you're here. So thanks, Niraj. So just give our listeners a bit of context about you and your background. I know you've worked in the Salesforce ecosystem for a long time, but a brief background of your experience today, please, Niraj.
Sure. So the two strategic platforms at Mercedes-Benz Mobility, which is the finance side of majorly the finance side of we are using Salesforce and MuleSoft to do 4 operational areas: the automation and agent desktop or workstation replacement with Salesforce. These areas are collections, credit, general customer service, and something what we call as retention remarketing. When you acquire a car from Mercedes, we finance it, and when the lease is over, we would like to sell you another Mercedes-Benz without financing. So that's the remarketing part. And this is being done globally, about 38-40 markets, 3 regions. We are live in Americas. Europe project is ongoing. Customer service is being done in Asia, 2 markets. Will be scaled further. So that's my responsibility area. I also have a little bit of Pega and Azure responsibility. We are using Azure for data factory, data migration into a data lake kind of capability there. And Pega is our previous collections platform that we will slowly be replacing with Salesforce. Before Mercedes-Benz Mobility, I was at Credit Suisse in their capital markets, global markets vertical. They have 2 large Salesforce instances. I was focusing on one, architecture and setting up a delivery team. Before that, I worked at JP Morgan Chase in a similar capability, architecture and delivery capability build out here based in Legacy West in Plano. And their goal was to have they had a commercial banking division, which is a large bank inside of JP Morgan Chase. And there are 5 banks within it, which do, from retail, cash, auto, other financing for a certain mid-size of clients, right? And there we were replacing CRM, and it was part of a large transformation project. So Mercedes-Benz and JP Morgan Chase both were large transformation projects for us. The technology selected was Salesforce. Before that, I was at Salesforce in the advisory services when it used to be called that. And I had 2 large customers, including State Farm, which is known to me as the largest Salesforce implementation ever. The first launch we had about 90,000 users. And I believe they are over 200,000 users now. It's a wall-to-wall approach for State Farm. But all State Farm 18,000 agents were launched day one with Salesforce as their workstation to service the customers. So that's my Salesforce scope. But before that, in my past life, I used to be a developer. I did a lot of .NET and Java. And before that, a lot of Power Builder work. And I have also done a lot of middleware integration tool kind of work, BizTalk and web methods and Azure Service Bus, and to name some few. Lately, we've been using MuleSoft for Salesforce projects. So overall, 30 plus years of experience in IT, delivery and architecture both. But architecture is close to heart.
Fantastic. And you mentioned as well during your intro, but you spent 4 years directly at Salesforce itself as well.
The State Farm project was through advisory services while I was an employee of State Farm. Yes, state employee of Salesforce. Sorry.
Fantastic. So some of your projects, have been hundreds of millions in terms of spend, right? Very enterprise, big focus on financial services, and that is a theme that has continued into your current role. So would you mind telling our listeners a little bit more about the mobility angle or I guess company aspect of the broader Mercedes-Benz group, please, Niraj?
Yeah, I was new to this term and I had never heard that term before. We all of us know Mercedes-Benz. We know it from dealerships, but we also know there's a manufacturer, the OEM, that makes the car, designs and makes the car. That's the second leg of it. The dealerships are the network, but there's the manufacturer and the engineering team. And there is a third team that gets the customer into the vehicle and keeps them into the vehicle, services them, and make sure they can return and stay with the brand. That's the mobility part, they call it. But financing of the dealerships and the buying the leases from dealership for the retail customers and servicing them and even repackaging them and reselling them in the wholesale financial markets is what the financial part, which is a large part. But mobility also does other things like charging network is being developed under mobility. There is a fleet management company that does white labeling for other brands other than Mercedes. And then there's ride hailing companies with other companies and some other subscription based car plans. Things like that all fall under mobility. Anything that is not to do with designing and manufacturing of the car is handled by the mobility piece. In Americas, we are known as captive finance, and there are almost every car manufacturer either has their own captive finance, and sometimes they white label with finance companies. They do multiple brands financing for multiple brands, right?
Fantastic. And your role title, strategic platforms. I was curious. What exactly does strategic platforms entail, and is there a
Yeah,
process internally for defining what is strategic and what's just a normal platform?
yeah. So normal platforms in finance companies could be .NET, could be homegrown, a lot of homegrown Angular, Node.js kind of applications, and not a single platform, right? You could have a .NET application also, and each application is funded as an IT application and built, and then a lot of services or microservices published and consumed, and you get a spaghetti mesh of things, right? Um, the strategic part comes where companies decide to, and AWS is a good case study on that, that they went from microservices to now monolithic platform, they're calling it. So they something similar is happening with Salesforce large customers. They have tried .NET Java to other lot of other vendors too, so SAP and Pega. So Pega was a strategic platform for us. We are moving away from it. But strategic means that companies are trying to get away from custom development business and have a limited IT business, but focus on business and business goals and the business requirement. Have a low code, no code development platform, and have a agile, fast delivery of business requirement and go lives within a year or year and a half maximum of start of a project to actually launching a large product that can actually sunset an existing product or set of applications. And that's the transformation. So State Farm was similar. They had mainframes and other systems. Um, we have mainframes here, which we replaced last September. But there are a bunch of applications in the, let's say, like 40 applications needed to do credit business, or 80 applications needed to do credit business, and each country having their own local systems. So strategic means have limited number of platforms, freeze all other application developments, and slowly as the funding becomes available, rewrite them into Salesforce and MuleSoft and other related platforms, and not expand the usage of legacy applications or those technical platforms. Mostly these are JavaScript, .NET, Java based applications, homegrown.
Fantastic. And I was doing a bit of research earlier about the mobility arm of Mercedes, and just to put a few numbers out there from the last couple of years. Revenue, and obviously better than me, but according to my intel, revenue $30 billion dollars goes through the mobility arm of the business. It employs over 10,000 employees worldwide, and finances over 5 million vehicles worldwide as well. So this is a big group within Mercedes, right?
Yeah, which you never heard of before.
Never.
Yes.
Very cool. And then my last question for you about you, kind of about you for now. What does your team look like in terms of team size now, like in terms of like numbers of people, where they're based? Tell our listeners a bit about kind of your role, team size.
Yeah, so our biggest presence was Europe. including Salesforce Europe, advisory, big part, large advisory presence still in Europe. We've been moving from Europe to offshore locations, so LATAM and India, but still staying with Salesforce. We had other vendors too in the mix, but because of the skills and the newness of the Auto Cloud product, we wanted to be working very closely with Salesforce, so we have gravitated more towards Salesforce. So the largest presence is offshore location, about 100 consultants, but then the next location is again Salesforce, majority some employees in Europe, and then a very small footprint in America is about 5-6 people. And I'm talking about technology side. We have a decent product team size as well from business.
Okay, wow. Wow. So you're covering a lot here. Just to run down what I've heard, you guys are doing this in Salesforce, right? Financing or a big part of the financing management, um, ride hailing, charging stations, service. Um, you're dealing with dealers as well as end customers, and not to mention your user base. Um, so how did you? Now I know you came in this later, but is this like all in a single Salesforce org, or
No,
how
so
many orgs?
yeah, so I was just trying to describe what MBM does, but
Mhm.
ride hailing is not a Salesforce related
Ah,
platform or product. The four areas that I described, the collection, remarketing, credit, and customer service will be Salesforce, and we are doing pockets of it. 2 years, 2.5 years into it. So another 2.5 years to go before we got all four areas fully done. We have retention remarketing part in Americas and the credit part done. The customer service is being done in Asia first, and the dealer part is being done in Europe first. We haven't done customer facing Salesforce yet. That will
so
come.
those are different Salesforce orgs per region.
Mobility has only one for all regions. So all 38, 40 markets will be on single instance of Salesforce. They are currently on single instance of Salesforce.
So how do you deal with things like GDPR? Like you keep everything in Europe, even if it's global?
Yeah, so we started with America's instance. As we speak, it's being moved to Germany in the Hyperforce instance. We were waiting for a financial services contract to be done for Hyperforce. That's been done. So the Hyperforce migration will be directly taking US-based instance from Virginia to Germany-based Hyperforce instance, and then
Salesforce is
Europe
doing
will
that for
launch.
you, I assume.
Salesforce will do that for us. Yes.
That's interesting. Any downtime, or they just
I mean, I had similar client Credit Suisse before it, almost similar 38, 40 markets. And the base was if you host somewhere like in Switzerland or Germany, then that location is acceptable to most countries, including Asia. So we do go through market to market, do a legal review. And then there are a couple of standouts in Europe, a couple of standouts in Asia, and Americas, there's not much privacy of data,
oh,
etc. So it's very lenient. So generally a German or a Swiss location is worldwide quite acceptable to most countries.
I mean, I was asking about the server move. Is there downtime when Salesforce needs you to move?
4 hours. Hyperforce migration from US first party data center to Hyperforce would be 4 hours is what you told.
Um, Not bad.
So
So
it's different than a site switch, right? Switch has within US we have a backup location. We don't even find out. Salesforce doesn't even communicate or maybe gives an email heads up. But there's zero outage. But from a first party or legacy data center of Salesforce, when they own the hardware, to Hyperforce, it's a 4 hour outage or downtime, according to
so
Salesforce. Yeah.
so tell us a little bit about the complexities of working in so many businesses. We
Yeah.
call them
Yeah.
businesses or
Yeah, they
divisions
are.
and
You're right. There's
markets.
lines of businesses, different functionality, different stakeholders, one monolithic platform. I see a lot of advantages, lot less disadvantages, and we can talk about it why. But yes.
Tell us.
Sure. So the biggest advantage is if say this company has three large legal entities, they're all dealing with the same customer in three different ways or four different ways. They're all sending them emails. We don't know about each other's communications to the customer, and I don't want to make a Salesforce pitch here, but you know where it's going. It's the 360. Them having to be on the same platform and same instance, or maybe now connected through data cloud would really make a big difference. These companies have as part of transformation, a CX strategy, right? They want to give a luxury experience to the customer and not a disjointed experience that you're not getting emails from sales and marketing and finance and roadside assistance, right? And all talking about different things, right? And they're all talking about the same leases or cars you have, right? So that's the biggest advantage across the firm. And then if you talk about just different parts of service, right? Customer engagement, could it be for collections, for general customer service, for roadside? If you talk to one agent and you had another query for another request you had with the company, the agent will have to give you a different toll-free number to call. And that's not a good customer experience. And then sometimes customer service also generate leads, and that needs to be sent it over to sales and marketing. And if there's a completely different legal entity and completely different instance of Salesforce, or maybe one per country kind of instances, then and there is not much handshake happening between these entities. Different toll-free numbers, different letters, different emails coming from, as if you're working with different companies, basically. So there is a lot of synergy in bringing same entity or even multiple entities in multiple markets on the same instance, because you get one view of the customer, but also the customer gets a consistent unified experience. And it is very important to modern day enterprises, the experience customers getting from them. So it avoids, on the IT side or on the cost side, it avoids a lot of integration efforts. You are on the same platform, data is available. You can use Experience Cloud for dealers, you can use Experience Cloud for customers, and you can use the inside agent consoles, right? The service consoles or sales consoles. So everybody is looking at the same data models, same data, same instance. And then you are Chatter. If I'm a big fan of Chatter old days from Salesforce days. Maybe you're doing Slack, but if you're on Chatter and you're talking to from one of the customer service areas to sales and marketing, you can just mention somebody and say, hey, can you look at this case? Can you look at this lead? Or can you look at this opportunity, right? Kind of situation. So huge cost savings in terms of integrations. And integrations are the long pole in the tent of Salesforce implementation in large companies. The Salesforce part gets done in 3 months, 6 months. The other year is spent on integrations and data migrations. So more applications, more departments, more lines of businesses you can put on the same instance of Salesforce, the less is the cost and the delays and the duration for Salesforce implementations.
So, I mean, talking about integrations, right? Obviously, you're in different markets. I'm assuming the markets all have different systems. Let's say the financing system within the individual markets, right? And then you have to integrate that back to Salesforce, I guess, to a common data model,
Mm.
right? So
Yeah.
how do you how do you do that, right?
Yeah. That's where MuleSoft comes in. That's the main reason Salesforce bought MuleSoft, right? Because, and I'm gonna talk in terms of generalize it, but middleware lingo a little bit. There is a canonical data model definition inside of a middleware tool. That's what synthesizes across variations in markets and regions and lines of businesses. But between something like a MuleSoft and Salesforce, it's a consistent view. That's the key to the success. So all things handled, the variations in the edge adapters of MuleSoft, again a MuleSoft term here or a middleware term here. Let the middleware tool handle the differences and let the solution be very consistent, reusable, single app, single solution globally within Salesforce. I mean, it's a nirvana ideal state, difficult to get to. And some customers can afford something like Informatica Cloud or in MuleSoft, others may not. But I highly recommend that handle the differences in a middleware layer and get a middleware layer that is not Java coded, but configurable again, like Salesforce is low code, MuleSoft is also low code or no code. So that's the recipe, if you ask me.
I mean, MuleSoft is obviously a good choice for this because you can build those layers of APIs, standardize the APIs.
Yes.
I'm assuming you're standardizing pick list values and things like that all within the MuleSoft API layer, right? So I guess you have an API per market, and then that goes to a core API, and then that plugs into
Not
Salesforce.
even not even that. It starts at what's the definition of a customer is account and a contact. You need to define that across all markets, all regions, and if you have a contract management system from a third party small vendor, then you might have multiple of them, like in the first question. Then you need to commonize whole CRM data model, starting with the account object and the contact object, right? What do you call a dealer in one country might mean something different in another country. So that is that's the part where the data architect role comes into play, and then their knowledge of Salesforce is important. And them working with Salesforce product managers is also very important to make sure we're not defining a lot of custom data models, even though it's no code and configuration. But if you don't store the Salesforce information for your business domain in the right objects of Salesforce, then you are highly customized still, even though it's through clicks. So the data model is the foundation, as I understood, for Salesforce.
Yeah, I mean, it's a little bit more than the data model, right? It's I would say the data governance too, right? Maintaining that unity of definitions, right? It's not
Yes.
just
And we can talk about governance. It will require another 45-minute discussion. A lot of companies are moving away from governance. The word governance has become a bad word, unfortunately. So because it slows everybody down, is the perception in the large enterprises. So they're trying to move away, trying to hit a hybrid approach, not agile yet enough, and the governance word actually slows them down. So it's a degree of you know at what level you want to govern the data model at, and then at what level you want to give a lot of leeway to project teams so they can deliver fast, right? So there is levels and layers of data model that should be centrally defined, and then a lot of flexibility to business to do the other 10-20% that they need to get done, right?
okay. So, I mean, honestly, that's a bit of a surprise to me. I did not know that data governance is becoming a bad word. Um, Shame on me. Maybe it's
Governance,
typical of the bad.
governance. It could be architecture. It could be Salesforce COE. I mean, those are the terms I see companies are afraid of and moving away
Yeah,
from it.
but you got to have standardized KPIs, right? Doesn't the C-level suite want to know global stats, and don't you
Yeah.
need
So the product
uniform
teams are responsible for them defining them globally. That is true. Um, but what I focus is on technology side and the architecture side, and data model is a practice within data modeling is a practice within architecture, and that's where the business looks at the IT side of governance bodies as the blockers, to be honest with you, right? Those are the things that they are worried about. The main first question you had, business versus IT,
Yep.
that's the crux of it. If you have a large three-level architecture board and it takes you 2 weeks each to go through three of them, then nothing gets decided for a month and a half. And that's not something business can afford these days. That's the governance piece I'm talking about.
Yeah, I
What are
mean, it's not
you
easy. Yeah, go ahead, Kiro. Sorry.
what are you seeing internally, Niraj, in terms of like buzzwords or titles that they're calling it? Because you also mentioned, COE is kind of phasing out a little
Yeah.
bit as well. What are you seeing replace it with?
Um, so large companies who come from waterfall background in finance, they use SAFe method quite a bit, right?
Yep.
State Farm was big on SAFe, and so is Mercedes. Uh, the teams that are new might sugarcoat and rename their ceremonies to be safe, named after safe ceremonies, but they are still waterfall, meaning integrations are not delivered within less than 6 months. So that's still waterfall. That's where hybrid kicks in, and safe try to support it in a hybrid mode. But what I'm seeing is the appetite is very low on waterfall, and business wants changes done very quickly, and the applications rolled out quickly, enhancements done quickly, and the issues fixed very quickly. And that can be supported with Salesforce being a low code, no code platform and a configuration driven platform, and you're not worried about infrastructure. So a lot of goodness of SaaS there, but also agile adoption is increasing, meaning pure agile adoption. And that brings us to the automation part quite a bit, right? The CI/CD and the test automation is very critical. If you want to make 2 releases a week, I mean, large companies make nightly releases, right? We know that. And Googles of the world allow developers to drop code in the production live, right, at any time of the day, right? So if you want to make business announcements and deliver them weekly or even more rapidly, or at least 2 weeks at the end of every sprint, then you need to have a lot of test automation. And that requires a mentality change and away from manual testing and all that, build a regression suite, build a performance test suite. But once you do that, then the business really values what IT does, really rapid delivery. And the Americas part we did it that way. The week we went live, all dealers switched in Americas, Canada, Mexico, US to Salesforce for credit application processing. They process billions of dollars of credit every month. Zero outages thanks to Salesforce and MuleSoft being SaaS-based products. No more data center issues for us. But also the test automation allowed us to do 2 hot fixes in the first week of go live. And zero testing was done for those 2 hot fixes. Everything was 100% code coverage with automation. So that's, once the business gets taste of that, they're not going back, right? And that's what is needed, I believe. Salesforce can be done manually in production directly as well, right? In a very low end setting. And then the highest setting, you could have Git and all things, CI/CD and Git actions or whatever. But test automation with, Perkins or Selenium and other frameworks for Salesforce, you can really drive that value to the business. So the answer to your question, link it back to the first question. Yes, business is driving these transformations, but IT has a key role because these kind of automations and these kind of architecture decisions cannot be made by business. That IT has an important role to play.
Fantastic. I want to pivot slightly, Niraj, into some kind of big, broader questions for you. So your track record for delivering large enterprise Salesforce projects successfully speaks for itself, right? You've done it time and time again throughout your career: Credit Suisse, JP Morgan, State Farm via Salesforce, and obviously you've consulted with Big Five consulting partners prior to that as well. What are some of the general challenges, or let's say like top 3 general challenges you encounter when you walk into a large enterprise Salesforce project? You must almost have like deja vu. I've seen this again. Where was it? Okay, this client, same thing, same scenario. What are those general challenges that you walk into?
Well, when you walk in, there's a lot of excitement about the new initiatives, new transformations. The folks from legacy side, it's not lost on them the failed attempts in the past. So they do have some kind of a doubt in their mind, and they might have been in their local data centers. Now it's going in the cloud, and they have a fear of losing the control over, or the job profiles are changing, or skills are changing. So that's one part I see. But the biggest part is when you put up $100 million transformation project, or a set of products to be built as part of that transformation, we're talking about three arms or 3 legs of it, right? There's a cultural transformation, there's a business transformation, and then there's a technology transformation or IT transformation. A lot of times people will focus on the IT part of the transformation, meaning a complete change of platform can be itself called a transformation. If you end up doing a lift and shift, that is not a transformation, not even on the IT side. If you just did a lift and shift, you have to question the requirements, and business has to do the business transformation, meaning get rid of the country variations as much as possible, get rid of the regional variations as much possible, fold as many applications you can into Salesforce, write those. But the cultural transformation is not somebody that we are directly tasked with, but ultimately we run by it, and we run into it, and we suffer through that as well, right? Because it brings a big mind shift, right? Everything is in cloud. Developers can sit anywhere and work can happen anywhere. That's a big mind shift, right? People are not in your office, not even in your country, right? Few seas apart. So that's a big mind shift. That's the biggest challenge I see. It's that the people have to consider all 3 are part of the transformation: the culture, the business, and the technology. And then the knowledge, right? You have to hire the talent. Some talent you cannot purely rely on an SI partner to tell you what you need to do, and they may not have the domain knowledge of your business, and you have no expertise in Salesforce or MuleSoft. So you do need to hire people from the industry who have done this before. That's another key of the recipe. And then the third one is you have to manage the cost of licensing and delivery quite aggressively, because things can go out of hand very quickly. A 6 month project could turn into a year and a half, and then you are running out of money, right? So that's the third piece that I see a lot of challenges in.
It's interesting you mentioned changing of skill sets, right?
Mhm.
Maz, I know you had a thought on this as well, but going from one system to another most of the time, right? You've got a skill set that's been embedded into an organization,
Mhm.
people that have a different technology background that then have to go on that journey with the business at the same time. And if you flipped it on its head, and let's say you were doing a migration the other way from Salesforce to another product, how many of that team would actually want to lose all the years of experience Salesforce they've been building to go and work on another product? I would probably estimate less than half would be willing
More
to
like
sacrifice.
20%. More like
Yeah.
20% are willing to learn in something. There is no, depending on how you're set up, how your performance management cycle is, you may not have the incentive to completely unlearn something. I mean, to learn Salesforce, you to really unlearn the .NET and the Java part, right? It's a true story, and we can talk about that in a separate call. But to unlearn something and to learn something for a year or two before you can call yourself architect again, for example, that's a daunting task for most people. And I would say 20% is a stretch. I would say more like 10% of the people are coming with that open mind,
Hmm.
and rest of them want to hold on to their roles but may not be willing to make that time commitment, right? I remember doing 3 certifications for Salesforce when I was an Accenture voluntarily, because I've been doing .NET, Java, SAP, Siebel for way too long, wanting to develop an industry vertical domain as well as some newer niche skills where there's less competition. So SAS was the one that came across. I spent a year and a half doing 3 certifications of Salesforce. I tell people that it will take them at least 6 months, and people do not think that they want to invest that kind of time, right?
Yeah.
But it's at least a 2 year journey to switch from .NET Java to Salesforce. But it's a very rewarding one, financially speaking as well. But not many takers. If you have a job already and just a new platform is coming, then you might feel entitled to just be allowing you to do that project even without the skill set, right? And that's a challenge too.
Yeah, so you've been doing system architecture a little bit longer than me. I graduated school in like 98-ish, right? And I've been working in tech throughout college. And back then, the big thing was obviously LAN apps or local apps, fat apps. Um, and the switch to the web was tough on a lot of people. A
Yeah.
lot, almost as bad, but not as quite as the switch from mainframe to networks, although that was pre my time. How though I don't think you've lived through the mainframe switchover,
I,
but
I did.
definitely the
My first job was COBOL programming.
oh wow.
Yes, I'm old.
Um,
I'm old.
Look well for your
I'm
age.
Just dated myself. I just dated myself.
oh cool. So I was gonna ask
But
how
first paid job was COBOL programming.
cool. I took COBOL in college, believe it or not. It was a course
Yes.
was offered. I used it once to read a piece of code to translate it, and that was it. That's
Yes.
my entire career in COBOL. Um, so yeah, so how would you compare the
Yeah.
switching from, you know, let's say, web-based ASP or Java? I assume you mean Java Web, right? Over
Yes.
to
Yes.
Salesforce.
Yeah. I
Let's
mean,
compare that right even to mainframe if you can.
yeah. I mean, the browser is a dumb terminal, if I can call it that. Accessing Salesforce, just the main part is the middleware. The middle layer and the backend layer is changing. The web layer is replacing the green or the blue screen or the black screen of the mainframe. Much user friendly. You can copy paste. You have cursor. You have a lot of other things available in a modern browser. JavaScript is very powerful. We all know the power of the web-based applications, be it single page interface or otherwise. But the biggest switch, the biggest benefit, I mean, it's it's almost unfair to compare mainframe with Java.NET. I mean, Salesforce is kind of built on Java, right? So it's that, but it another 4GL, 5GL, or whatever we want to call it. Salesforce probably is a 5GL system, but mainframe, you had flat files, and you had the four programming sections available in COBOL, defining your display section and the file section, and some very if it was basic logic you could do, and the terminal was not very user friendly. And there came the power builders and Sybase of the world, where they and Visual Basic, right? They build the fat clients and Access database if you are using a local database, or Oracle or Sybase or SQL Server. And that was the three-tier architecture. And Power Builder even had object-oriented programming, very powerful. Then came the ASP.NET and JSP and those pages. HTML, very powerful again. You can very easily get the cross-device, cross-browser support, and the whole World Wide Web happened. Again, still hard you to write a lot of code to connect to SQL Server or Oracle or Sybase, and you have to still write business logic, data access logic. And then comes this platform like Salesforce, where you go and you define your business domain as an account, and the contact object is already there, but you can add a vehicle. Now vehicle is also there. Financial agreement is also there. So most of the domains data model is already there. You're adding some additional objects through clicks. You don't have to worry about deleting tables and recreating them and saving the data, remigrating them. If you add a new field or you change the name of the field or data type, all the backend data operations are taken care by Salesforce for you. So you're getting an out-of-box data model. You're getting a lot of data. You don't need a DBA, with no due respect to DBAs. And what you're doing is, as a Salesforce developer, you're talking to a BA or a business user. They're saying, I need these kind of reports, and here are the reports from legacy system. You're figuring out what fields are there, what fields are not there. You're doing data mapping. You're figuring out your data migration approach. You know you need to make some integration calls through APIs. You can call them from Salesforce or through a middleware tool. But most of your time is you're designing a flow graphically. You might have to write a formula field or even Apex to do some calculation if it is more complicated. But you are able to show the next day to your business what they described to you today. That's the power of the platform, right? So under the cover, Salesforce is like a hibernate kind of framework. If you ever work with that, or an hibernate on the .NET side, you are defining your domain, and the UI and the data model and the app layer and the data layer all are being generated for you. And Salesforce has a nice UI. Some people complain about the clicks to get to child objects, but otherwise it's a good UI. A lot of drag and drop capabilities. Plus, you got Apex Stream. So things like DocuSign, you don't have to build an integration with custom UI for that. DocuSign has done the work. You can drop that into your interface. So very powerful. Thousands of applications in the App Exchange. I mean, it's the equivalent of Play Store or App Store from Apple and Google for the consumers. It's the business version of it. The main challenge that if Salesforce can solve remains in the integration data migration space, unless the client agrees to do more with Salesforce as a monolithic platform. So that's been my journey. The moment we used to do a lot of Java and .NET development, and when I was in Accenture IT team, and the moment I come across saying we're going to re-platform all our sales application to Salesforce or something like that, I was part of the team that's selecting the platforms. The way I understood Salesforce, that it was running the 30 API versions or 30 engines of the different versions of Salesforce in parallel. So if you build something with version 20, and then you grow that application, next day it could be version 21, and then now it's whatever 50, 60. All parts were running in parallel. You never had to go back and upgrade your previous code or page to the new version. In Accenture, I saw projects for SAP upgrades that took 2 years.
Wow.
And then when I came to Salesforce, the upgrade was zero downtime. I mean, used to be some downtime. Now it's 5 minutes. And next day, your most 99% of your app just works. When I looked under the cover of Salesforce architecture, I was mind blown with the metadata concept. I heard the term metadata for the first time. And then I learned that Salesforce doesn't actually have these objects in the physical data model. They are all JSONs or XMLs and abstracted in various layers. And somehow Salesforce can get the better performance than Oracle itself can get from Oracle database, even though these are not physical tables in Salesforce. I was just
Hmm.
mind blown, right? And I spent that year and a half learning Salesforce just because the love of the architecture change that Salesforce was doing there for me. We
Good.
had a server farm of 30 web servers. I had to stay awake over the weekends for after application deployments to check every server to make sure the app is running on every server and the load balancing is still working fine. And we had to change our load balancing algorithm so many times. And we had so many issues working with Akamai for remote countries for Accenture. Once I came across Salesforce, I have not looked back. And I think people who have not taken this journey towards SaaS, I think I highly encourage them to consider it.
Do you think, again, a quick yes or no, do you think there's still time to make that journey, or has the ship sailed to move into SaaS?
No, I mean, companies have to do it. Most companies have Salesforce instance, maybe a small one, but every company that can be sold Salesforce has been sold Salesforce. It's just
Right.
degree of usage and which departments are using it and how many have their own admin in the business versus in IT. But everybody has Salesforce. It's just the size of the implementation or footprint. But from an IT side or even from business side, I encourage more people to train themselves. Trailhead is a great resource, and even if you're in a business domain, you could have a potential career in technology thanks to Trailhead, right?
Yeah.
So I've seen people make that switch either direction. IT people became product owners and product managers, and business users became configurators of Salesforce platform or admins at least, right? It's not a
Yeah,
choice. It's a SaaS is a I mean, maybe the AI and Gen AI and the agentic models will change that a little bit again.
Hmm.
But Salesforce has advantage there as well because they got the CRM data already. Sorry.
yeah. I just want to point out the reason Salesforce gets their performance is because they. I'm saying this somewhat tongue in cheek, but they cheat, and they do that by forcing you into SQL, which really limits your ability to write really complex data queries.
Yeah.
And then it uses much less compute, and then that's why you spend so much time writing code to keep your relational integrity in place, right? I have to write a workflow to update the account field when you update the child field, and all that is to restrict the CPU and keep everything running fast. It's very intentional that they call it a relational database, but it's really not. It's somewhat
It's not.
denormalized.
It's the object. It's a JSON serialized, deserialized into blobs, right? Whole
Right.
data is stored as blobs. But recall in SQL, Sybase, and Oracle, I worked with all three of them. You had to write triggers, and whole business logic was dumped in the trigger, database trigger. Talk about data governance, right? You don't should not have any logic in the data layer, right? And the stored procedures were thousands of lines of code, and the whole business logic was in the two-layer architecture, right? The database had the logic, and then you had another fat UI layer or something. So we come a long way, right? With
Hmm.
microservice, SOA, microservices, and now SaaS like platforms like Salesforce. We come a long way, but you're right. There are things to be desired still, right?
In terms of enterprises, so going back to, so we see, leaders, they might be stepping into that enterprise landscape or environment, I should say. Perhaps their business has gone through a merger or an acquisition, and they've got bigger, or perhaps they've just made the career change. Right, they've had an opportunity. They've proven their trade at a mid market customer, and they've got an opportunity at an enterprise business. What are a couple of things? What are the absolute not to do actions they should take when transitioning to a large enterprise organization and implementing Salesforce? Based on your experience, what should they absolutely not do?
From an employer perspective or an employee perspective?
Let's say one for employer, one for
Yeah,
employee.
yeah. So, not everybody gets lucky with a greenfield approach, right? We use the term brownfield as well. These transformation projects I've been lucky were clean slate, meaning the companies have tried other things, custom or other platforms, and they were saying, now we're going to do with Salesforce, and this is our last try. And if you arrive in those programs at the right time, then you're doing Salesforce from scratch. And if you do get that lucky, and I've been lucky in that sense, then take the opportunity to do the sprint zero, as we call it, right? This in agile world, build the architecture foundation, get a middleware tool in place, get your services right, so that then when you start after 6 months of foundational work, when you start building business functionality, then you can deliver every 2 weeks. And maybe
Okay.
6 weeks is not 6 months is not realistic. It's more like 9 months. But first MVP out in 9 months, but you spend good time in those first 9 months building the architecture foundation. Don't take shortcuts there as an employee or as an employer. Invest that time, and then you can have a good payoff in 10, 15 years of using that system. Don't have the pressure to build something custom, quick and dirty, and launch it in 6 months, right? It doesn't work in an enterprise place.
Mhm.
It's a recipe for a redo. You can use it for demos to business and sell more, get more funding with it, but it's not a usable system. You might have to integrate with 20 other systems. So that foundational work is very important. Sprint zero, we call it. So
Right.
that's my one advice for sure for both employees and employers. But if you're making a switch, make sure you understand why to invest in a proper automation for CI/CD DevOps. Make sure you understand why you need to invest from day one on test automation, regression, and performance both. And again, that's the second thing. Don't cut corners there. Actually,
Yep.
you will face a lot of objections about you're looking for the best ideal architecture or beautiful things to do. Actually, that is the cheapest and the fastest way to do this transformation project. Get your foundation right, then you can really go fast and agile.
Mhm.
Otherwise, you will have challenges for going from one market to another, one line of business to another, if you don't have these automations and DevOps pieces taken care of.
What would be your one bit of advice for a company that are implementing Salesforce? Let's say a financial services
Yeah.
business, because a lot of your background's been in that industry. Just one bit of advice that you would pass on based on your years of knowledge of successfully implementing Salesforce.
Zero customization. You, as an employer who's funding 100 million or 10 million or whatever for the project, you should demand that there should be a zero customization. That means map it to standard data model of Salesforce. If you need to create custom objects, you need to justify that in some kind of light governance architecture mode. Quick decision making is very important. And the second one is no Apex coding, no JavaScripting, no LWCs.
Okay.
We have flex cards. We have a lot of other things now. If you can afford an industry cloud, if you are in an industry that Salesforce supports, go for industry cloud. You will not need to build a lot of custom code, Apex or LWCs, or write a lot of JavaScript code. So if you are a company, I would say that you put out a mandate saying zero customization unless Salesforce code config cannot handle a external legal compliance requirement, right? GDPR might be one example, right? You might have to write some code to do GDPR. Unless you can go to App Exchange, then it's still zero customization. If you can get an App Exchange, or you can code and click, use no code or clicks or config only, that should be a very simple mandate from leadership, and that can drive a lot of success in the programs and cost savings as well.
Let's focus on industry clouds, Niraj, because I know this is something we spoke about in our brief. You mentioned a preference for, where possible, opting for industry cloud features over custom Salesforce development, which is just a viewpoint that you've touched on here. Um, Mercedes are using automotive cloud. What did it replace? I assume it was core cloud. Would you say it's been a success? What has been some of the
Yeah,
biggest benefits you've seen of going with an industry cloud and integrating it versus just the core cloud
yeah.
product?
So there's force.com.
Hmm.
It comes with account and contact objects. I've seen companies not even use account and contact object. Come across an ISV who's building a package for auto industry, but not using even an account and contact, and I had to reject them in the selection process, saying if you're gonna create custom account and contact object, how will I drop that package into my implementation? It doesn't work, right? And I have to
Right.
build integration. So then comes the Service Cloud, Sales Cloud. We were using Combo before we switched to Auto Cloud. We are needing a combination of Auto Cloud plus FSC because we are captive finance company or finance company. So the lending framework is the first thing being created by FSC team. And FSC used to be a package, we spoke about it earlier, and now it's being rewritten to the core, meaning all FSC objects soon will slowly become available to anybody using any of the industries or sales or service cloud, licensing apart. And then once you have these core objects, you can then layer your vertical on top of it. So you might need a concept of a household in any industry. You
Okay.
might need a concept of a credit application in any industry. You might need a concept of a contract object in any industry. So there's those industries are contributing to the core of the model. And then what industry cloud does, which is more powerful to me currently than auto cloud itself, is there are a lot of features like omni studio, service process studio, which is allowing me to avoid apex and javascripting to a large extent, almost to the 99% or 95% extent. I don't have to do any of that. So you will see with lending framework and auto cloud, if you discover it a little bit more, you will hear about something called a stage manager and an integration procedure. These concepts are not available in sales cloud and service cloud. These are higher level abstractions. You can really do integrations without even getting MuleSoft into the play. More and more integrations can be done in auto cloud without needing a middleware as well. Especially the real-time calls, near real-time and guaranteed delivery, order delivery, you still need something like MuleSoft. But if you're just making a plain simple web service call, zero code required, and you can have a workflow that makes multiple integration calls, and you can track the status of all through that through Stage Manager, and individual calls are made through integration procedure. If you do case management, you might end up with hundreds of types of cases, and that's not a good thing because each case type will need fields on the case object then. And that's where the service process studio comes into play, where it allows you to create a name value pair of custom attributes by case type without touching the case object. So it's very powerful feature, but it requires you to understand what not to do. Then don't do the customization of the case object. Look at service process studio, build these templates, they call them. Each case type could have a business process and you could need different information, and that is defined in set of attributes on a template. It completely avoids customization of case object, and then you're saving so much on the limits. The global, how can your question, right? The other question, how can you scale such a platform, single instance to whole company? These are the industry cloud features that will allow you to do that because you're not hitting the limits of case types and subtypes and number of fields you can have on an object. So industry cloud is very powerful feature. It costs extra, obviously, but I think the savings come in terms of you need app builders, you don't need apex developers then. You don't need a javascript lightning web component developers. Okay, you can make do with developers who are 2 3 years into Salesforce, have configuration skills. That's good enough. So that's the trade-off. You pay a bit more on the licensing side, but you can really enforce that zero customization kind of principle with the help of industry cloud. So we were ahead of auto cloud when we did the
Okay.
credit application. We borrowed the lending framework data model, but we had to build our own workflows and UI. We're in the process of switching it back. That's other advice to companies who are new to Salesforce. Get your roadmap right. Don't take pride in customizing before Salesforce can deliver that functionality. So you have to have the patience. If you want to do case management, do the case management first, because or lead management or opportunity management, because that exists already. If you want to go deeper into your businesses processes, then wait, collaborate with Salesforce, try to get those through the industries. Don't create a completely custom module of your own. It's going to be expensive.
So a lot of our listeners, and myself included, don't know much about auto cloud in terms of like the feature set. Like what did it do, or like what are they
Yeah,
used for specifically
yeah.
within the auto industry?
So maybe I will give you an agent floors flavor of it.
Okay.
Let's just jump to the new concept.
Yeah.
So there will be agents. There will be industry specific agents, 4 agents, as I understood. One would do, or five maybe. One would do generic customer service. Hey, I need to make a payment, or I missed my payment, and I need to call you or chat with you. So that will be the first agent, general customer service. But that will be auto specific. It will know if you're need wanting a code to terminate your lease early. early termination code. So this agent would know what kind of document to generate and give it to you. The other agent is the credit agent. So the credit agent could help a credit analyst analyze all the information collected by dealer from the customer about their history and financial information from the credit bureaus and summarize it for the agents to quickly understand and help them underwrite a deal. There is the retention remarketing. So there will be another agent which will help retain the customer with the brand, right? Automate things around returning your vehicle, getting a quote on a new vehicle, things like that, right? And the last one is collection. Obviously, nobody likes the collection part of it, but the internal collection users could be benefiting from knowing what else is going on with other agents. Is this customer talking about a new lease while they are in collection, and vice versa? So the the four agents are being envisioned by AutoCloud now in this space. Another one could be, which is not the domain I'm in, is roadside assistance, right? So there is very specific functionality, fleet management, this B2B2C angle. There are drivers and then fleet managers, and then the company who's the might be white labeling their fleet to financing it and then offering fleet management to their B2B wholesaler, and then retailers are involved. That's a complete domain of its own, fleet management. Forget
Mm-hmm.
about just auto financing in general. So there's a lot of deep industry specific things that are happening, and AutoCloud is working closely with customers like ours to collect these requirements and define the data model. We're working very closely with the FSC team as well. But this domain, captive finance is very small domain. Number of customers is small, but lending framework, everybody gonna need lending framework. Whether you're underwriting a credit card application or a mortgage application or even an insurance, you need to go through that same process. So um, that's the work that's happening right now.
What about so you're using Financial Service Cloud also. Do you have that integrated with Auto Cloud? Do they sync together, or are you keeping them as two
Yeah.
separate products?
So the main reason why FSC team is moving away from a package-based approach and rewriting their data model to the core is so that other verticals can use it. So
Okay.
you can buy AutoCloud package. AutoCloud is not done as a package, by the way. It's directly done as to the core. So it's not a package.
Okay.
So they are the most modern vertical, newest vertical, but the older verticals are replatforming to the core. I think Salesforce way they set up the product teams, what easier for them to package-based approach, quickly realize that it's not reusable across the verticals. But so AutoCloud has support for dealers, has for end customers, for finance company, for roadside assistant kind of groups, for
Mm-hmm.
the contract management integration, servicing the contracts. So there's a lot of functionality, but the main part that came out initially in the AutoCloud was more dealer facing or customer facing. The
Yeah.
back offices are being addressed now.
I did see that was one of the biggest benefits of the product. It talked about how a lot of these automotive businesses they are heavily reliant on other dealer management systems.
Yeah, yes, the third parties, the dealer tracks and route ones
Yeah.
of the world. Yes.
So Auto Cloud plays nicely with those, and I think that's probably the biggest benefit. But I think it's really interesting your perspective on. I think it's fair to say, if given a choice, pick an industry cloud would be where you sit on the argument of industry cloud versus core cloud.
I mean, if you're financial services, FSC is no brainer, and that's the
Yeah.
area I want to continue to stay engaged into. Unless another captive finance company is looking at Salesforce, but I'd say FSC and finance is my focus. And if there is a finance client more than FSC, the value is in the industry cloud, which you get bundled into any industry package. In any industry vertical you sign up for, you get the industry cloud features. That's the biggest bang for the buck.
Mm-hmm. Got you. Now, I guess obviously automotive cloud's very new. Mercedes being probably at the forefront, and I know one of the early adopters. How much is Salesforce kind of leaning on you and Mercedes for feedback? Are you on like an
Heavily.
advisory board or anything like that? Are you getting involved in those kind of conversations?
I mean, our leadership in Germany HQ is quite engaged with
Yeah,
them. Good partnership. We had their product managers visit here us in Fort Worth from India and
nice.
Detroit. So we know all of them. We have their emails, their phone numbers. We text message some of them regularly. So very good, strong relationship. It's Salesforce's vested interest to know the domain more and
Of
understand what
course.
they should be building. And I like that part where Salesforce does collaborate well, including product teams. Not every project gets to be very close to product teams, but if something new and large scale, then they do get to. I've been lucky that way. Uh, cannot say the delivery happens at the pace that customer expects after sharing all the use cases and the knowledge know-how. The delivery does take time, right? Every release we get chunk of work delivered, but the sales cycle starts much sooner, right? It doesn't wait for 2 years for full product to build. And that's the roadmap discussion. If you are a customer and signing up for something with Salesforce, please do not take pride in doing things before Salesforce. Align your roadmap with Salesforce and do not commit anything other than maybe case management or lead opportunity management, if maybe the first safest thing for you to try. We
Mhm.
tried credit underwriting, credit decisioning straight from day one, and we succeeded, but we had to put a lot of horsepower on it.
I think we've lost Maz.
You're muted, Maz, or not hearing you?
Some technical difficulties. I know the question that Maz wanted to ask, so I'll ask it for him once we get him back on board. He's dying to know, how do you go about managing hundreds of resources in different countries? Because
Yes.
that is maybe the $1 million question, right? How do you
Yes.
successfully manage so many resources
Yes.
on a global scale?
And the credit is where it's due. It's Accenture internal IT. We always had development centers. So while I was at Accenture, I had a development team in Buenos Aires. I had a
Okay.
development team in Dalian, China. I had a development team in Philippines. I had Pune, Bangalore, Bombay, Madras in India, and I had a development center in Madrid. So I'd done the full gamut of locations you can find. I've not done like Poland or something. I mean, some of our Salesforce Europe folks are based in East Europe as
Yep.
well. Salesforce, in my mind, and I spent 7, 8 years there, was the first company that figured out the whole 24/7 model. And I'm not talking about production support. I'm talking about development. We never had full development teams here. Only one time we hired a consulting firm to teach us agile in a very large project we did. We did people on the floor, on the ground, and we were very aggressive with agile approach, completely agile, no hybrid. But other than that, all Accenture projects were done offshore. Uh, I Funny story. I go to office. We were quite allowed a remote flexibility by Accenture for last 5 years. I was there. They actually paid us money to set up a home office so we can do odd hour calls with imagine doing an odd hour call with Philippines, which is 13 hours away from you, right?
Wow.
But since Accenture figured out this model and they deliver all their client projects in that model too, because of the cost concerns and all that, right? The scaling that's required. They had a AT&T project. I remember Australia telecom company, thousands of people deployed,
Hmm.
and these remote development centers do work. COVID forced companies here and financial companies to here to learn that. And I'm like,
Yep.
guys, this we were doing 15 years ago. This COVID thing we were doing 15 years ago. I would go to office and set up a call with my colleague and offshore team. We will be both wearing headphones during the lunch break, talking to people offshore, not talking to each other face to face. And then I'll walk to them, can we go out, grab a lunch? He's like, no, I got another dev team call. So you guys go ahead and go get the lunch. I'm like, I'm not coming to office. If you're not going to spend time with me, I'm not coming to office.
Agreed.
But
Yeah.
Accenture, that's where I learned the offshore development model does work. State Farm had 17 sprint teams. They were on the ground. They were planning 34 sprint teams. We actually, Salesforce stopped them from creating more sprint teams. It was a very large project and a very aggressive deadline. Safe does come handy for old companies who are used to waterfall. Um, but what you do is actually, I get this task. Every interview of mine has been involved with that. How do I go about setting such a DevOps structure, right? It's a DevOps exercise. and we create fully contained sprint teams. So you can do business analysis to production deployment and support in each sprint teams, and we rotate these responsibilities, the shared responsibilities. That's what we did at JP Morgan Chase. That's
Hmm.
what we do today. Um, and then you have the architects embedded in each sprint team. You have dev leads identified. The senior developers becomes the technical lead for the sprint teams. You do this common architecture rounds, talk to each other, resolve some decisions or blockers, and then you do have dev managers, right? Who are, or the dev leads are coming to a dev manager to talk to them about what blockers they are facing in each sprint team. And then we have a lot of product team calls too, where we are discussing what feature is not safe to include because automation is not ready. So those are a lot of negotiations. So there's a lot of politics, a lot of negotiation at my level,
Yep.
but we do have a lot of structure in the teams where there's delegation and authority delegated, where things get work done by individuals even in a large setup like that.
Just conscious of time, Niraj. Very quickly, what's next for you and Mercedes and Salesforce? What do you got lined up in terms of projects?
So America's sort of stable and done, focus shifted to Europe. I'm a more of an initiative based guy. I've been in 3-4 year long initiatives, large complex transformation. My wife is advising me to not do another transformation project, looking at my health or whatever, my aging and the
Because
stress.
you're never at home.
Yes,
You're always traveling.
yes, true. I'm an European client. The advantage working with European client is early morning calls, and you can get work done in the second half of your day. I really like that part, but the transformation part is the hardest part because of the cultural part, right?
Mm,
That's the one you are not directly in charge of, and you do not want to create a project around that part. That can derail a lot of things. I mean, I'm sticking to financial services. American America-based companies is my still focus. Um, Another European client, I would not mind it, right? Um, Europe project is mostly driven by Europe right now. We were driving Asia project more heavily from here. So we'll see what happens. We are getting acquired by the parent company. So a lot of changes coming soon. But I'm for now, like I mentioned to you, if somebody wants to look at a CTO with a buy into a lot of SaaS platforms, then I'm game. But financial services is what I'm sticking to right now. And something like a low code platform, no code platform. I'm also looking into new platforms that are coming up just to
okay.
compare them with Salesforce. I'm not
Any
there
front
yet.
runners, Niraj? Any ones that you've seen at the forefront that you think could rival Salesforce, or at least give it a run for its money?
Not there yet.
Not yet.
Not there yet. And Salesforce is a good AI play right now, so kudos to them. The stock price reflected that.
Hmm.
Uh, there is a Gartner report that I'm studying for low code, no code platforms for 24. The report is out. 22 and 24, I was comparing. There are 4 or 5 players that are seated above Salesforce. And I'm looking at all of them and trying to compare the architecture magic is there or not on them, but not there yet. But there are
You,
few.
you know other people play a sport for fun, but you're still working for fun as your hobby to
Yeah,
continue to
because
learn.
these large projects, my learnings is more about how to navigate the landscape and politics and all that. Um,
Yep,
my actual technical learnings will come from me going back and looking at what Salesforce has done and what others are doing.
understood. Fantastic. Well, Niraj, thank you. We really appreciate having you, as part of our podcast series. So thank you to you.
Sorry, it took a few months. I,
We got there. It's
I
worth the wait.
you were very patient with me, but sorry, we were very busy, very
No
busy.
worries. You're worth the
Uh,
wait, Niraj.
Yes.
yeah, it was
For
an
for
absolute
our
pleasure. Thank you.
for our listeners, please do not forget to subscribe to the CRM Success Show for more fantastic insights and lessons learned from industry leaders like Niraj Jain that we've had join us today for this episode. Thank you.
Thank you.